Hey everybody, I'm Rob Reep and welcome to my studio. So it's duck season in South Arkansas, and for some time I've had in my mind an idea for a painting that would both honor and reflect the poetic nature and beauty of the animals that take part in this yearly harvest. After getting an idea together in my mind, I went ahead and purchased a large 36 by 60 inch linen canvas. Of course, I need to refine this idea even more before I start to work on such a large surface. So today, we're starting a small study sketch that I'm titling Waiting Partners. So join me over at my easel. Let's get started. Before we jump into today's video, let me take time to invite you to visit my online shop at robreepstudio.com. There we've got a number of products available that include my artwork, from pillowcases featuring my paintings to coffee mugs, even to our annual Christmas ornament. Now this is a new tradition that we started back this past Christmas in 2018. This is 2018's Christmas ornament. Engine 123. They are available at robreepstudio.com. Make sure you collect one. Limited edition, only 250 were made. Of course, if you go to robreepstudio.com, you can not only buy prints of my work, of select works, but you can also purchase original paintings. So be sure to stop by robreepstudio.com. Okay. Here is the large 36 by 60 inch canvas that I'm going to be working on in the later portion of this project. This is by Masterpiece Pro. It's a beautiful, beautiful canvas. I haven't even put a wash on it yet, but there's good reason for that. We're not ready to start on this actual surface just yet. My easel's right over here just behind me. I've already pre-cut, almost to an exact ratio, a hardboard panel, oil primed, ready to be painted, has a wash on it already. And that's what we're going to be working on to do our final sketch. So let's head over to the easel and get this project started. In the last 7 to 8 months, I've been using a very limited palette, and I'm going to do that again today with this painting, and I'll explain more to you about that throughout this video. But just from left to right, I've got titanium white, a cadmium lemon, very important there, a cad red medium, or you can use a permanent red, ultramarine blue, and that gel-like substance, clear substance to the right, is a product made by Gamblin called Neo McGilp. I've been using it quite a bit lately. I really enjoy it. The surface that I'm using is a hardboard. You can see it's got some texture to it already. I've got a wash on it as well, but it's oil-primed surface. If you're oil painting, I highly encourage you to use an oil-primed surface. Yep, it's more expensive, but hey, you know, it's not a big deal. This panel's handmade in-house by me. I cut the boards myself, prime them myself, with my own special blend, and it works fantastic. And I make my panels really, really, really cheap. But they're nice quality, and they hold up well. But that's why you already see that texture already on the canvas itself. And of course, that look of that look of texture, it actually does have some relief to it. So this surface has a little bump to it when you bring your brush across it. You can see even there that I pick up a little bit of that texture. I'm starting off this painting with just a dark mix of color. This is my deepest shadow, and I've gotten to where I really enjoy starting with my deepest color. Just because I don't want to lose my shadows, if that makes sense. I really would like to keep those. I want the viewer to still be able to see some details even within the darkest areas of the painting. And if you start off with just this deep black, then you can't go any further later in the painting when you need to stretch things out. So I really work hard not to lose those shadows. Now the first few moments of this painting are going to seem like they drag on simply because I'm laying on these dark shadow colors, and this certainly won't be the only areas that the shadows go. I tend to jump around quite a bit when I'm painting now, and I know some artists might find that inefficient, I guess is the right word for it, but for me, I'm not looking for efficiency in my painting. I'm looking for quality in the end product. And the thing I like about jumping around from these dark shadows into a new color here in a few minutes it does add variety to the colors. If I clean off this brush, go back to mix up this similar color, it's going to be slightly different, and that does add that variety that I'm looking for throughout the rest of the painting. But the first steps I'm needing to tackle in this thing are just getting a general shape for those dark shadow areas. And again, I'm not painting layer upon layer here. What I'm doing is I'm piecing this together. I've got a good idea. I've got my photo reference to the right, which you guys can't see, but I know where I'm going with this. I've got it planned out. Again, this is just a sketch, so I'm planning this for a larger piece. And this is the practice dummy, okay? I'm just trying to figure out where the problems are. And at the end of this painting, I'll have a much better idea of the color issues that might arise in a larger version of this, and compositional issues that could crop up as well. As I continue to paint these darker shadow areas, I want to go into a little bit more detail about the limited palette that I discussed in the earlier part of the video. This is, again, something I've done for about 7 to 8 months now. Prior to that, if you go back and look at some of my older videos, I was definitely painting with a larger palette with greens and all kinds of other colors, even some new blues mixed in, and I still occasionally might throw something like that in, but it's really, really, really rare now for the style of painting that I'm doing, and this was an attempt to improve my painting by simplifying the process. Originally, what happened around 8 months ago, I of course am a big fan of an artist by the name of Scott Christensen, and Scott Christensen, of course, pushes this very limited palette with grays in his repertoire, in his painting arsenal, and I tried that for a little while. I did work with those grays and the idea of bending colors. I really liked that. These small incremental changes throughout a painting. That kind of appealed to my minimalist nature, I guess you could say. And for a guy, for me as an artist who was struggling to create cohesiveness throughout a painting, I felt like simplifying the process might be exactly what I needed. So after a while of painting with those grays, I kind of realized that the grays I thought were hindering me. Now, that's not the case for everybody. Some people might really take to that. And I could see the benefit from it. I'm not going to lie. I think maybe that might be something I try again here in the next year to see if it might work now that I've been painting with this smaller palette already. But for me, the extreme limited palette of just those primaries really did seem to help me out. Now they did mute. I've muted a lot of my colors since then. But again, that's more of a direct attempt by me to create less intensity or less saturation within my own paintings. But I want to give a shout out to Scott Christensen. His videos have been a tremendous help to me. You might want to go check those out. I believe his website has the DVDs for sale or direct downloads. I believe those are on Vimeo, so you can go check those out. He's an unbelievably talented artist. I can only dream of painting like he does, but he's the one that really inspired me to pick up this limited palette and try to make something with it. I've laid in most of, or a number of the dark shadowy areas, including one of the darker trees in the background of this painting. But I'm going to stop for now with the darks and start on some midtones. And this is on the darker end of the midtones, but this is just background foliage, just limbs and trees and brush, all kinds of stuff mixed in. And this is something I've become accustomed to doing in some of my more recent pieces. It's taking a painting and really blurring the background, and so this is just broad strokes. It's kind of a mishmash of just random color, all within the zone that I'm trying to hit, the tones that I'm trying to hit, but still it's calculated, but yet it's also relatively random in this background. I just want to get a nice look of background brush and background trees. So I'm using, see, I'm using a relatively large brush compared to the size of the canvas at this point. I've gotten to where I also don't use a lot of brushes on paintings. I'll use maybe one or two, maybe three at the most, but I can typically hone in on an entire painting with just a couple of brushes. And I think that's helped it. Again, simplifying the process is something I'm working hard at. Reflecting this down in the water. Now I'm using horizontal strokes occasionally for water. I will use, of course, vertical strokes as well. So it just kind of depends on how I'm feeling that day, and also how the priming of my back surface actually took place in the final stages of that. But as you can see, I'm dropping in more color. Just now going to a lighter tone, working to add a little bit of light. Now this is a gray painting. There's not any sunlight in it. There's not any really strong, vibrant colors in it per se. But I do need some light, and just by adding some titanium white to that previous color, I'm getting that shade that I need, which is then reflected, of course, in the water as well. It's a quick process. It's especially the initial colors of laying on the background shapes. That's got to go relatively bang bang. You know, you've got to be willing to just move, and that again adds variety. That adds a touch of looseness, which I like. Not all people like it. I know I've had several people that have seen past paintings of mine when I was a very young painter, and a few people who used to look at my past work have commented that they're not really sure they like some of this loose stuff. But that's, it's just a personal preference. We're artists, and you have to follow what you want to paint. And there are other people who love this type of work, and I certainly do as well. I'm trying to find a balance between loose brush strokes and fine detail towards the end of the painting. But at this point, we're still in that loose brush stroke stage. I'm going to go ahead and start on the actual clothing of the duck hunter here. And the original idea here was to use camouflage, to actually put him in camouflage. I end up, before the end of this painting's done, just keeping with a solid green fabric, and that may have been, you can call that a bit of a safe way out, and maybe it was, but I felt like it looked nice. So I just stuck with it. Once it was finished up, I had intended on going back and adding a little bit more variety of color here. And you can see now I've put in the pants and the waders as well. And starting on this flesh tone here, there's a lot of talk about flesh tones. Everybody gets crazy about flesh tones and how difficult they are to produce. Just from my perspective, I've really worked on portraits in the last few months, and I've really improved. I'll hopefully share one of those on Instagram if you want to follow me on Instagram at Rob Reep, and you can see some of my portrait work. But these primary colors work fantastic for skin tones, in my opinion. You can get just about any color you need out of these primaries, and it simplifies it to the point that those colors are going to be cohesive with the rest of the piece. Nothing's going to look out of place. They all go together. It's a family. It's a family of colors, and I don't have any issue with using these for skin tones. Now, if I was doing a huge portrait, really detailed, if I was a portrait artist only, maybe that's a little different. Maybe then you extend that palette, and I don't have the experience to be able to comment on that or give my opinion on that. I can just tell you that from my experience, for flesh tones, my limited palette of these primaries works just fine. Some of you out there may be wondering, why am I bouncing around like I am? And I'm still working on. This isn't the detailed stage. This is far from the detailed stage. And in fact, on a sketch like this, there is, I would say, no really fine detailed stage. It's simply a sketch. But if you're wondering why I'm bouncing back and forth from the background to the hunter to the dog, why I'm going back and forth and not just finishing one piece, I've got to make sure that everything fits. and particularly the shading. Am I getting colors too dark? Am I getting them too light? And if at some point I realize I've made a mistake, I can at this point go ahead and deal with that without having to make drastic changes. So I'm just trying to get a feel for where this thing's going. If you'll notice on the right side of this panel, I've got two really large masses of dark color. And that's the one area when I finished this painting that I was really disappointed in. And in the larger version, which I've already started at the time that this video is coming out, I've already got the larger version going, and I'm not going to film that larger version. It's a studio piece, and it's just so long. I'm not going to deal with that on the YouTube channel. But that was an area that I had to really focus on fixing, and that's why you do these small paintings. That's why you do a small sketch. That's why we go outside and paint on plein air, is so that we can come back into the studio and see what we did wrong, see what went wrong before we move this thing to a really large canvas or even a medium-sized canvas that we've invested a lot of money in. If you're like me and you're investing money in linen canvas, something like a Masterpiece Pro canvas, as I talked about earlier, you know, you're putting out quite a bit of money for those canvases, and you're planning on selling them for a nice amount of money. You want the final product on the large canvas to be just amazing. And that takes some planning, and you can't do that on the fly. At least I can't do that on the fly with my large canvases. I need to do that prep work here on these small panels. And that's an area, that right side of this panel is an area where I realized straight off the bat I didn't hit that mark where I needed to. But I'm going to fill in the cap. He's wearing a baseball cap, or it's not a baseball cap per se, but it's a hunter's cap in a baseball cap shape. So I'm shading that at the moment, just about the same color as the jacket or the coat that he's got on. And it's still really broad strokes. Everything is really broad throughout the early part of this painting. I have moved to a slightly smaller brush, but I'm still, you can tell I'm not spending a lot of time painting on the panel at this point. I'm studying it. I'm trying to figure out where to go with it. Trying to make these are broad marks at this point, but they are going to be the foundation of what's going to come later. I've got to be accurate with them and think about them as best I can. Now I've got a little area I need to fill in here of the water, so let's go ahead and drop that in. And at this point, it's just so hard to see it coming together. It's painful. That's the way I feel, at least when I'm in this area. And I used to get really frustrated at this point in a painting. And if you're like me and you're a person who does experiment quite a bit, it can be very difficult to believe in the process, in the midst of the process. But you do have to trust. I've talked about that in past videos, even before my big break. You have to be able to just trust that you are able to pull it out and get a solid piece out of it before you just quit on it, because it would be very easy right now just to drop this thing and say it's going nowhere other than in the trash can. But let's not do that. Let's stick with it. This is another color that after studying the final panel version, I really did not think I hit the mark very well with this color. So I ended up painting a little bit darker, more cohesive version of this gray that I just dropped in. Ended up painting more of a green along with it. It was supposed to be a shadow color that was slightly lighter than the deepest color, and I got in a hurry, I think, and that does happen. Even using the primaries, I do get in a hurry sometimes and don't nail the colors. But hey, again, that's a mistake that can happen here on this panel. We don't want that mistake to happen later on when we're working on the largest version. Luckily, that color happened to fit pretty well with this gun that the duck hunter's holding. And just notice even now, even in this early stage, how so many of the colors are so close together. It's the duck hunter, when this thing's all said and done, and there's a good reason for this, he's going to have a lot of the colors on him that are actually in the background and on the water. And again, he's wearing camouflage, so that's part of the reason. He needs to fit into his environment. But that's the challenge of this piece, is to make him stand out, even though a lot of the colors are very similar to what's going on in the landscape around him. I've started work on the dog now, this lab, who's wading in the water with his hunting buddy. I thought when I painted this that the dog was the hardest part of this sketch. I don't know yet. I haven't actually started the dog on the large canvas yet, so I feel like it's going to be a little bit easier on a larger surface. But at this scale, it was so difficult to get for me to get the colors right, to get the shape right, and I had to really challenge myself to not give up on the dog too early in this process, because right now it's looking rough. I mean, it just does. But just keep at it and try to manipulate the shape and refine it. Refining is a lot of what we do. One of the most distinguishing features of this painting is going to be a really vibrant blue area in the front where they've kicked up the water. We're going to have some little white caps, or what I call white caps, where water's splashing from where they're walking. But there's also just this hefty area of just vibrant blue rippling near the foreground. And I've got to lay a base layer in of color before that, and this is obviously not a vibrant blue. We're still very gray at this point. But we're got to lay those foundations. We'll make just a very small color shift into a little bit lighter version of that same color to place right in front of the hunter. Of course, we'll leave some room, or we'll plan to have some room where he's going to have some reflection from his own legs in the base of this painting. But we've got to pay attention and make sure we don't drop too much light into the shadowy areas, because right behind the dog and right behind the man, to the right of each one of them, you're going to have a little bit of a deeper shadow color. And that's going to help to, which we've already got in, that's what that darker color is. But we're going to have those splashes almost right in front of those where they're just make a nice popping color, a pop of light. I'm not sure the best way how to say that, but a pop of light. You can see some of that lighter color going in now. Now we're going to go ahead and take this time, because we've got this color here. We need to start getting some of these lighter colors in the trees. These are, again, going to be cypress trees, a lot of them, in these bottoms. And that's one thing I've seen a lot of in my life living in South Arkansas are cypress trees. Some of you throughout the rest of the country don't see a ton of cypress trees, but down here in the swampy areas, that's what we've got. And in the Delta, the Mississippi Delta, where these duck hunters oftentimes go, these river deltas, you're going to see a lot of these type of trees, and they give off this beautiful color, and they have these beautiful bases to them too. They're a lot of times really wide at the base, and they have these large cypress knees that pop up. It's just a beautiful landscape to paint. Now, I don't go out and do much painting on plein air in the swampy areas. This is definitely one of those paintings where you want to snap a photo and bring it back to the studio, because if you're brave enough to go painting in the deltas in those swampy areas, then you're a braver painter than I am. I can paint in cold weather in the mountains all day long, but yeah, I do, or in the hot summers here in Arkansas. But getting outside on these cold duck hunting type mornings in water is not my thing. Now, I would suggest. Now, I didn't sketch this out when I first did this little study, and that's what I consider this as a study. And that's where a lot of my problems came in. I was talking about those trees on the right, that's the area I'm working on now. But I didn't sketch out the trees, and I could have planned some of that better on even this sketch. Since I've already started my larger version while I'm recording this, I can tell you I've done a much better job of planning out the trees, and that was an area of frustration for me during the sketch. Was it just never quite meshed perfectly. And you know, it's never going to be perfect, but there were some hiccups in this sketch, and I know that, and it's a sign though that you're improving as an artist when you're able to see mistakes. And the other thing that happens in a painting like this is, of course, I'm filling in some gaps now, and that means I'm going to lose some of my tree edges, and that's okay at times. I'm okay with some blurred edges here or there, but I will go back here in a little bit and work on this. And even at this stage, though, you can tell how abstract this is looking, and I don't work on that really hard. I don't try to make it an abstract painting. I want this to be a landscape, but I'm also okay with loose strokes. You can tell we're getting really close to having the panel totally covered with some sort of color, and it's just now starting to take shape. Now it's got a long way to go. We're not there yet. I figure we've got a little while to go, but we're closer than when we started, right? But this is the point. This is at the point where I start to get excited about it because I can see it. It's starting to come together. It's starting to mesh well. The colors are working. The dog is, while he's a very very abstract shape at this point, the dog actually is not falling apart yet, and that was my concern earlier in this piece. The hunter looks amazing. I mean, he's really coming together well. It's just a matter of taking it to this point and then refining and refining, but not refining too much. That's another key. I really need to strengthen the trees. We lost a little bit of them in the background painting process with the brush and the foliage and those limbs in the background. So I'm using a large brush here. I'm not going any more detailed, but I am working very very hard to just strengthen the color in these trees. I think we're going to need to add some lighter colors here in just a second or two. But at this point we're working to just see what's wrong. There's going to be a mix of light versus shadow on a number of these trees. Now the tree I'm working on right now is we want to give the idea that it's recessed even further back, or not necessarily further back, but that it's in a deep shadow. So what we're doing now is not adding any highlights to this particular tree. Some of these other white trees, though, these lighter toned trees, will have the same color on the back side of them, and I didn't throw that in immediately. That was just for an act of speed to be able to just see. There we go. We're dropping in some of this darker tone. Now your reflections down at the bottom, they don't have to be perfectly accurate. I've got a number of students who come and take classes from me, and the second they start painting water, they want almost an exact replica of the top of what's above surface, and it's just not that way in nature all the time. Now, if you get perfectly still water, yeah, you're going to have a relatively close depiction, but in water like this, where oftentimes it's back creek water, you're going to have a little movement, and this hunter's been walking through it. There's ripples going through. It's going to be shaken up a little bit, so you're not going to have an exact look on the bottom. It's going to have some ripples to it, and you don't have to be perfectly accurate. In fact, that's one of the things that adds variety in a painting like this. I'm going to thicken this tree up a little bit. It got lost in the background. Adding a little bit stronger light tone to some of these trees. Dropping in that little bit of a shadow on the back side and then the reflection on the bottom. And in my larger version, I did end up diversifying the tree shapes a little bit more. I helped it out. I think my larger version is going to be much better. But again, that larger version is better because I found the mistakes in this sketch. I love that little area of ripple that I just dropped in. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. I'll just continue across the background of the painting, looking for areas that need lightening or darkening or a change in width. I love this tree back here, the one that splits off. That's just a really pretty tree, and it deserves to be highlighted a little bit more, of course. I'm also thinking about something here. If I have that light area behind the brown of the base of the gun, it's going to help the gun stand out. So that's something else that comes into play. And one of the things that I also notice in students who bring in photos that they want to paint, a lot of them are not willing to alter them in any way. Let me just say this. We're artists. We're not replicators of photos. Yes, it's okay to paint things exactly as they are, but it's better oftentimes to create an artistic landscape. And if you need to move something, move a tree, move a person into a different spot, it's okay to do that. You're not compromising the scene itself, the realistic scene. You're creating a more ideal scene. You're creating a more artistic scene. And sometimes for me, I like to put meaning into paintings. I definitely do. In fact, a lot of my larger studio pieces, I've become one of those painters that hides a lot of things in my paintings. And you can't do that if you're painting the landscape exact. So I don't tend to worry about moving something a little bit, even just a hair, an inch or two on the canvas. It's okay to do that. It may help it. If that hunter was 2 inches to the right, that gun stock almost blends in with the background of that foliage and the limbs and all that. Instead, I've got him 2 inches to the left, and that gun stock is right in front of that base of that lighter tree, and it stands out. I like that. I think that fits well. It's a variety shift, and I'm very very okay with that. I think that works. Now we're going to have some darker color at the base, which is going to help offset, and it was true in real life too. But this is going to help to offset the water from the actual tree line. I'm painting this pretty quickly. I did think when I finished up that I did not get quite enough blue in this. I had a bit too much red in it and yellow, so I did end up shifting this color a little bit in the larger version. And see, every time I paint something, I am reflecting that into the water. Now, in this sketch, I didn't take as much time as I needed to, but it would have been better to slightly darken those reflections, because oftentimes you do get a reflection that's just a little bit darker. Not much. It's not always really noticeable, but a slight reflection, darkening in the reflections. You see, that right there is going to create the illusion that these trees on the right side are further forward. Obviously they are, because the base of them are closer to the man. Now I'm going in with this more vibrant blue, and I'm of course painting this alla prima. Some of this color is going to mix in with that underneath, so it actually dulls down a bit of the vibrancy, the saturation that I'm needing. I will in the larger version paint this in just like I'm doing now, but then I will let that set up, let that dry. I'll go back on top with a smaller area of even more vibrant blue. But this is going to add some stuff to this painting before it's all said and done. This is going to add that little pop of color that it needs, because at this point it's very dry. It's very muted. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. I mean, there isn't anything wrong with that, but I do want a little pop of color. We need to reflect the legs of the hunter. So I have darkened this tone just a little bit from even even what his waders were. Just dropping in a little bit of color, not taking too much time to worry, overly worry about this, because we've got some white caps or splashes to go back in on top of some of this. So we just need a little color in. This same color I'll be using a good bit on the gun, which we've still got to finish that up. Right now he's got a half of a gun. So we do have to work on that here in just a second, but we'll finish up these legs and see how that blends when you're painting alla prima, and that blends that well. It's easier to paint water for me. I find it easier. I've switched to a liner brush, and this is the hardest part for a lot of my students, is to paint a straight line. Well, just that comes with experience. I don't. There's no easier way to say it. It just comes with experience to be able to paint a straight line. I don't always nail it. Okay, and sometimes you get the thickness a little too heavy, especially on a sketch like this. I'm darkening the back shoulder area of the gun. I'm not a hunter, so please don't get on me too hard about my terminology on weapons. I'm not a hunter. I just like to paint hunting scenes, and I do know a little bit about hunting breeds. My wife is a dog groomer, and we love dogs, so and that's what I paint a lot of, or actually the puppies. We'll have the putting in the trigger or the trigger guard in, and darkening the base of the gun. We'll have some stronger cherry color or reddish hint to this gun before this painting's finished. And here it comes. I've got that mixed and on my liner brush. Now, please keep in mind, folks, that I do cut down these episodes. This painting took longer than this episode it actually is, and I cut down some of the monotonous painting that I had to do in it, and also cut down on some of the mixing that goes on, because I do tend to mix a lot of my colors before I even started painting, but inevitably I'm going to have to mix something that I don't already have on the palette, or there's going to have to be a slight shift. And I work really hard to try to get colors correct. I try my best to do that. So we got a really hard line there. There's nothing wrong with blending some of that out, like I just did, softening that line just a little bit. That's the other play that we have to watch out for and make. It's part of the strategy that you have to take on when you're landscape painting, is where not only are the colors correct, but this idea of soft versus hard lines. Got an even lighter color, an even brighter color on the gun stock. And that's just it really improves this hunter already. That one color, or those two colors, really just changed the entire dynamic that he had going on. And we're still not done with him. We've still got some highlights to drop in on the hunter. I was fairly happy with the face of the hunter at this point, or at least I should have been. I did end up making a change to his face. You'll see that here in a few minutes before I finished up, and I think I ended up making it worse. So I'm going to have to really be careful in the larger version of this painting to not overwork the face. I got to get that thing accurate, especially in a larger version. It's going to be more detailed. So I should have just left it at this point, because it doesn't look wrong. But sometimes we try to fix things that aren't broken, and that'll come back to haunt you. Again, going back with a flesh tone. There's not a lot of hard and fast rules I'll give my students, but one of them is, because I do have students come in that want to learn how to paint portraits. And the first thing I tell them, I repeat, do not go to your art supply store and purchase flesh tone. You will regret it. Your painting will look horrible. It's just not wise to do it. And see, that one little drop of color right there adds that thumb. And that really adds an area of dimension to the hunter. Yeah, but again, I have a lot of students that want to go out and buy flesh tone, or they already have, and they bring it into the studio, and I just have to tell them, just throw it away or carry it back. If you haven't used it, return it, because it's not what you need. You've got everything on your palette if you've got those primaries that you need to do this, and it's not a necessity. It looks fake. Just don't go near flesh tone. A pre-mixed flesh tone, pre-tubed flesh tone. Don't do that. So we talked about those saving our shadows earlier. So this is one of those points where we've done a good job of saving our shadows, because now we need to darken the color a little bit. And so I've done that now. I've slightly darkened this color, and I can go back over some of those shadowy areas or areas that need darker shadows, and I can amp it up a little bit. I lost a little bit of this shadow on the hunter's left side, our right side, but that right there just fixed that. So we need to now start thinking about some highlights, I believe. It looks like I'm going to stick with shadow for a second or two. So I pull that down, and I'm just kind of feeling this as I go. He's going to have a little shadow underneath the jacket. That's going to create some separation there for his pants. Dark area right in between the knees, which is again going to create an area of variety and separation. Don't paint things like you think they'll look. If you're working from a photographic reference, pay attention to what they actually look like, especially when it comes to a portrait. You're going to have shadows that pop up in places you would not think they would. You're going to have highlights, and you're going to have midtones that are in areas where you don't think they belong if you weren't looking at the photographic reference. You've got to pay attention to that. Paint things as they are, not as what you think they are. I talked earlier about moving things. That's okay. It's okay to take artistic license at some point. But if you don't pay attention to your photographic reference, or your live study, if you got a person in the studio and you're painting their portrait, if you don't pay attention to what they really look like, and I know it sounds so elementary, but paint it as it looks. Darker colors again near the top of this coat. He's got almost a hood on, so that's what I'm working on, trying to get that hood texture in. This is an area of artistic license. The photographic reference I had did not have a zip or a buttoned jacket. I ended up adding like a little quarter zip near the top. I thought it added a variety and an area of interest that was not there to start with, and I think it helped. I think it did add some pizzazz. Working on his hair. I'm going to blend that out a little bit. Thought I got it too dark. Work a little bit longer on getting these shadows blended the way we want them. So I'm taking just a dry brush at this point and just blending this black out a little bit, these black shadows out just a tad. Just spreading color, mixing color from one area to the other, preserving the lines that I really need. Again, between his left arm and the shadow area, we need a strong line. We don't need to blend that. But in some of those areas of where the fabric's just rolling over and crumpling up, we need a little bit of a break. We need a little bit of a blending going on. All right, so I've gone in and I've mixed up a slightly lighter highlight color of this green. Now I'm not amping up the saturation. I think that would be a mistake. Sometimes we go with too much color. So right now I've just got a light color mixed up, and I want to add some highlights, get some sunlight on him. I know that it's a grade A, like I said earlier, it is a grade A, but there's still going to be some sunlight peeking through, and it's going to highlight this jacket in some places. And very oftentimes that's opposite of those shadows. Of course, he's going to be wearing some things around his neck, including maybe a duck call, and If there is a detail stage of a sketch like this, then this is it. It's still going to be relatively broad strokes, and I'm just going to be using a liner brush, so the actual paint distribution is going to be smaller. But we are going to be doing what would be the detailing of a painting like this. I'm not trying to do anything really elaborate. I just want to give the impression of certain objects around his neck. And of course, I've got to be careful. I do want the idea of something, of some type of ring or chain that these things are hanging from, but I've got to be careful not to put too much color on the canvas. So I'm almost just scraping through that paint. I'm dropping down a little bit of brown, but you can see how I did just almost leave a little line, or two little lines, very small, and the viewer's eye, the audience's eye, is going to pick up on that, and they're going to see that level of detailing, and that's something I really like in my art, is to have that type of stuff in it where it's almost invisible, but yet it's still there. Now, this next part I'm leaving in the video, but it is something I wasn't happy with when I actually studied it a little bit later. I darkened underneath the hat, which was a good move, added a little bit more shadow, but then I tried to darken the shadow on the face, which that stroke right there wasn't bad, but then I moved over to the highlight side of the face, and that's where things started to get away from me with the facial structure. I don't think it ruined it, but it certainly didn't help it. And I've got to, in the larger version, just realize that wasn't the thing to do. I ended up, even with one stroke there, trying to maybe add a little bit of beard, but I just darkened it too much. But hey, again, this is a sketch. I realized the mistake, and I'll try not to make it on the larger version. Take a highlight color and add a little bit more pop on this gun. Just some areas where light's just really shining off of it. And look at how much that one little stroke, changed that entire gun. I just can't get over how much better that looks. Add a little bit of highlight on the upper part, the crease of his right elbow. But I did go back and touch that up a little bit. Pull that color out and blend it some. I think it needed some blending, and that helped it. But I love how the gun looks. For a sketch this small, I was really happy with how that came out. Adding a few more highlights on the actual coat. We're fairly complete, I believe, on the hunter himself. We need to work a little bit more on this foreground water. We're not there yet on it. So I'm gonna go grab a little darker color here in just a second. It looks like I am gonna do a little bit more work on adding some highlights to some of the tools that are on his hanging from his neck. Adding a little bit more of a look of a necklace there. Darkened it actually just a slight bit. We've taken that dark color and we've added some stronger colors, some murkier water in the base of the foreground. I need to work on the dog a little bit more. He's got to get a little bit more shape going to him before we call this thing complete. So we need to add his eyes. Again, on this sketch, I'm not worried about making this dog perfect. He's going to be very loose, but I just want to give the idea that he's there. In the larger version, he'll be much more detailed. These labs are just beautiful animals to paint. Even this small of a scale, they're still very pretty. See that dark color there added that right ear, and then I've added some highlights as well, which changed him. And I'm dropping in some white now, these splashes that really give some movement to it. And you can see I cut out some of where I'd painted there, but still, this is still just it's a relatively simple process of just following the water, paying attention to it, dropping it in random but yet very selected areas. You don't want to get too much of this stuff around the edges. but you do want to create some ideas of ripples. And we're getting a reflection of the dog, of course, in the water. We've got to make sure we don't totally push that out of the painting, but we're getting him in now. And this painting's getting near, or this sketch is getting near completion. We'll put in some dark colors there for the dog's eye. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this painting. I'm fairly happy, ready to get started on the larger version, and adding a few more highlights to the coat, to the edge, which is going to again create dimension within this hunter. A few more highlights to the pants. And we're about ready to call this thing done. That's it. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me here on my channel. Please come back and see me for another video soon. Be sure to follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Rob Reep Studio and on Instagram at Rob Reep. Keep painting. God bless everybody.